Nimrod, for me, is really interesting. He was the great-grandson of Noah, descending from Noah's son Ham through Cush. Genesis 10:6-8 talks about this. Ham was the son who disrespected Noah after the flood, resulting in a curse being placed on his son Canaan. It talks about this in Genesis 9:20. Though the curse did not directly affect Cush, but Cush, Nimrod's father, was known as the ancestor of several ancient nations, including the Ethiopians and other African and Middle Eastern peoples. From this lineage, Nimrod arose as the first post-flood king, establishing the first centralized empire in the land of Shinar, known as Mesopotamia. He founded some of the earliest cities, including Babel, where the Tower of Babel was, Nineveh, stuff of that nature. It talks about this in Genesis 10:10. Nimrod's rule was characterized by one with aggression, tyranny, and rebellion for God, culminating in the construction of the Tower of Babel, an attempt to unite the world under one single empire in defiance of God. Talked about in Genesis 11:1. I'll go into more detail about that in a second. Nimrod established a system of false worship centered around himself as a god, along with the worship of stars, planets, and demonic entities masquerading as deities. We've talked about this in the past, about all the different gods that are worshipped, like the Hindu gods and the Egyptian gods. Those were all modeled after actual demigods, but those were actual Nephilim, fallen angel creations, which is where everything is rooted. So it's really interesting when you look closer at it, because Nimrod's kingdom enforced paganism, astrology, and the veneration of idols, specifically steering people away from the worship of the true God. So this directly opposed the faith of Abram. Well, his name is Abraham, but then it was Abram, who was raised in a region where the city was deeply influenced by Nimrod's religious system. But despite growing up in a pagan culture, Abram refused to worship Nimrod's false gods, openly proclaiming that the one true God was Yahweh. His defiance of idolatry led to a really dramatic confrontation with Nimrod, who saw him as a threat to his kingdom. So Abram's father was one of the idol makers that worked under Nimrod. But Abram, he rejected the worship of these false idols. And when he destroyed his father's idols, and, it goes into deeper detail in the book of Jasher. It's actually a really interesting story, but I don't want to dwell too much on that. After he destroyed those idols, he was brought before Nimrod and commanded to bow to the king and Nimrod's gods. But Abram openly rebuked Nimrod's worship of the wooden and stone idols, telling him that these so-called gods are nothing more than lifeless objects, unable to speak, move, or even save themselves. He literally challenged Nimrod's beliefs right to his face that these idols had no power. And saying, quote, "Why do you worship things made of wood and stone, which cannot speak, hear, or save you from harm? Have you not considered that they are the work of men's hands, and they can be destroyed just as they were created?" Abram then points out that it is foolish to worship the sun, moon, and stars, as they were merely created by God and do not possess any divine power themselves. He proclaimed to Nimrod that the true God, the one who created the heavens and the earth, is the only one worth and worthy of worship, and that Nimrod's gods are deception, leading people away. So, needless to say, when Nimrod hears Abram talking to him like this, he is big time enraged, viewing this as an act of defiance against his kingdom and his claim of being a god himself. So the king demands that Abram is put to death for blasphemy. So Nimrod ordered Abram to be burned alive in a fiery furnace as a warning to all that would defy him. The news of Abram's execution spread quickly, and by the day of his punishment, hundreds of thousands of people had gathered to witness this event. Essentially, the entire city came out to see the man who had defied the king, and many of Nimrod's own mighty men included, expecting to see Abraham perish. Now, this furnace was heated 7 times hotter than it normally is, so intense that even those who approached too closely were burned by the flames. The fire raged so high into the skies that they said it was touching the heavens. But Nimrod's men continued to mock Abraham, expecting him to suffer a really humiliating death. But as Abram was cast into the flames, something miraculous happened. The fire did not even touch him. It didn't even burn his lower garments. The only thing it burned was what was bound around his hands. The people watched in shock as Abraham stood unharmed in the midst of this inferno, literally walking freely, surrounded by the divine presence of the Most High. And this kind of reminds me of the later account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Babylon, the fire that was meant to destroy, but had no power over God's chosen servants. You know, as the crowds gasped in terror and wonder, even a dozen of Nimrod's own men that had brought Abraham to the fire were too close, and they were consumed by the flames, literally burned alive by the very punishment that they had prepared for him. The people watching began to fear the God of Abraham, realizing that he was greater than the false gods of Nimrod's kingdom. For 3 days, Abraham remained in the fire unharmed. And when he was finally brought out, the entire kingdom was in shock. Nimrod himself was shaken. But though he still refused to acknowledge Yah as the one true God, he feared Abraham from that day forward. So after that event, Abraham left Nimrod's land, choosing to serve God, and his descendants would go on to become the nation of Israel, carrying the covenant of God, forming the foundation of the Israelite nation. So getting back on to Nimrod, after that, he built the Tower of Babel as an act of defiance against God. In Genesis 11:4, it declares, "Come, let's build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the entire earth." The phrase, "a tower that reaches the heavens," may mean more than just a tall building, but an attempt to open a portal or some type of supernatural realm, possibly reconnecting with the fallen angels who had corrupted humanity before the flood. You know, my research reflects that the Tower of Babel was an early ziggurat or even a stargate meant to challenge God's dominion and create an alternative, gateway or multiverse or timeline. Kind of reminds me of what we talked about earlier today. Because of Nimrod's rebellion and corruption, God intervened, confused their languages, and scattered the people all over the earth, effectively ending Nimrod's attempt to create a one-world empire. Talks about this in Genesis 11:5. However, the spirit of Babel, which is Babylon, continued throughout history. And Scripture says it will return in the end times as Mystery Babylon, ruled by the final Antichrist, talked about in Revelation 17:18. So after God confused the languages and scattered the people, Nimrod's empire literally started to fragment into multiple nations, many of which maintained the pagan worship and all the occult traditions that he had established. His legacy continued in the form of Babylon, Assyrian, and Egyptian mythology. and that's where Egypt formed from, with the pharaohs and whatnot, where he was worshipped under many different names. Nimrod continued to be worshipped as the Marduk or Osiris or even Baal. Some traditions state that his wife carried on his legacy by promoting the worship of him as a god, creating the mystery Babylon religion that influenced many pagan traditions worldwide. This Babylonian influence would later be revived in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire, and ultimately in the prophesied end times Babylon in Revelation. Though Nimrod's physical reign ended, his spirit of rebellion against God continues to influence the world today, and many believe he will return in some form as that final spirit of the Antichrist. I mean, this stuff really, I like the old historical context of learning the history of, the biblical roots. This stuff fascinates me. Nimrod's rise to power, his connection to the Nephilim, and his rebellion against God all positioned him as a prototype of the coming Antichrist, and potentially something even more sinister. The very same son of perdition prophesied in Scripture destined to return in the last days. In the book of Jasher, an ancient Hebrew text referenced in Joshua 10:13 and 2 Samuel 1:18, gives us more detailed account of Nimrod's rise to power, his supernatural abilities, and his possession of the garments of Adam, which may have given him divine-like strength and dominion. Nimrod was born during a time of increasing wickedness. In quest and deception, he positioned himself as the supreme ruler over the all-known world at that time. Scripture states that he wore these garments originally given by God to Adam, which were passed down through the generations, eventually taken by Ham, then Cush, before given to Nimrod. These garments supposedly gave him superhuman abilities, including the dominion both over animals and men, which literally allowed him to subdue and unite the post-flood world under his authority. The idea that Nimrod was more than just a king, of having supernatural power, aligns with Genesis 10:8-9, which states that Nimrod became a mighty one on the earth, Gibberith, rather than being such born as just a normal man. The same terminology used to describe the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4. The phrase became a mighty one has led many to believe that Nimrod was somehow transformed or altered through genetic manipulation or demonic possession, or even an occult ritual that merged him with fallen angel technology. This would explain his obsession with building Babel, a city whose tower which would reach the heavens, a phrase that could indicate an attempt to physically breach the supernatural realm or to create a gateway between dimensions, much like the modern scientific efforts of CERN, which many believe could be opening portals to other dimensions today. I mean, the scientists of CERN have literally gone on the record saying they have sent things through and some things have returned. So I ask, could modern technology like in these occult rituals and genetic manipulation be used to resurrect Nimrod in preparation for the final kingdom of the Antichrist? The idea of bringing back a world-conquering leader from ancient times is not just the stuff of movies. It may very well be part of Satan's plan to usher in the last days, as in Revelation 17:8 provides a cryptic but chilling clue about the identity of the final world ruler. Said, the beast which once was and is now not, but yet will come again. What does that say to you? It sounds like it's talking about someone that was here, that is not, but yet will come again. I've often wondered about that verse. Many believe that this passage suggests that the Antichrist will not be just a new figure, but a resurrected one. Someone who once ruled the earth like Nero Caesar or possibly Nimrod, and will return in the final days to fulfill Satan's ultimate plan. So where it gets even more interesting is Nimrod's DNA was found in 2003. A lot of people speculate the reason why we were in Iraq for the invasion was because the tomb was discovered. And this tomb, was labeled as Gilgamesh, having been discovered in the ancient ruins of Iraq, a city closely associated with Nimrod. So the connection between Nimrod and Gilgamesh has long been speculated, as the Epic of Gilgamesh describes a mighty warrior king who was part human, part god, and ruled over the ancient world with supernatural strength. The timing of this discovery kind of raises my eyebrows, as Western intelligence agencies and military forces reportedly secured the area and transported undisclosed materials out of the country. Things that make you go, Could they have been retrieving the remains of Nimrod himself, or at least his DNA? If so, this could align disturbingly well with the transhumanistic agenda of the globalist elite, who are literally obsessed with genetic engineering, cloning, and the idea of reviving ancient rulers through DNA manipulation and technology. Modern science has already made massive advancements in the DNA manipulation. We've seen this through gene editing with the CRISPR technology, cloning. If the remains of Nimrod were contained and preserved, and we had that genetic material, it's not far-fetched to say that they could recreate a physical form using modern genetic techniques. So this really raises the question, could the Antichrist be cloned or genetically engineered version of Nimrod with the same demonic spirit that once inhabited him? Revelations 13:3 describes the Antichrist as receiving a fatal wound that miraculously heals, causing the entire world to marvel. What if this not just refers to a future injury, but a resurrection of an ancient being who was once worshipped as a god? Like occult rituals that could summon Nimrod's spirit. Bringing back Nimrod may not just be a scientific endeavor, as it could also involve all these different ancient occult rituals designed to reawaken his spirit. Throughout history, mysterious religions and secret societies have sought to connect the ancient entities through necromancy and summoning rituals and demonic pacts. Just look at the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and even more modern-day occults, how they perform rituals in an attempt to resurrect long-dead rulers that bring forth supernatural power. I think about the Freemasonry, one of the most powerful secret societies influencing the modern world today. It traces back to mystical roots, back to Babylon and Egypt, with many of its rituals and beliefs aligning with the ancient worship of Nimrod. Some researchers believe that the occult elite view Nimrod as their rightful ruler of the world and are actively working to bring him back as the prophesied ruler of the final age. The Bible describes how Satan will give his full power and authority to the beast in Revelations 13:2, allowing him to deceive the world. Now, I'm just speculating, but if Nimrod is the one who once was, now is not, but will come again, then his return may involve dark supernatural forces working alongside modern science to reanimate his physical body and call forth his ancient spirit. I don't think these things are far-fetched with what we've been seeing lately. In Revelations 9:1, a terrifying prophecy describes the abyss, the bottomless pit, being opened and releasing demonic entities upon the earth. Could this be the moment when the final Antichrist is fully revived? Using technology such as CERN? You know, a lot of scholars believe that the abyss is a prison for, fallen angels and demonic spirits. And if Nimrod was indeed a Nephilim hybrid, his soul, his spirit may be locked away until the appointed time of the end. And if CERN or any of their occult projects are attempting to open these dimensional portals and gateways, they may be just trying to not release just the fallen angels, but Nimrod himself. Again, I don't think this stuff is real far-fetched based off of things we've been seeing lately. Especially with the WEF and all their pushes for transhumanism. Looks like they are literally preparing for the return of the Antichrist, this modern push towards artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and genetic engineering. This could all play a role in bringing Nimrod back as the ultimate ruler of this enslaved world that they see. The elite's goal is to merge humanity with machines, erase natural human biology, and to create a population that is fully controlled by a global governance system. And this does align perfectly with Revelations 13, where the Antichrist implements the mark of the beast, a system that literally controls who can buy or sell based on their allegiance to him. If Nimrod is that Antichrist figure, then the world is rapidly being prepared for his rule. A rule that will demand total submission and worship, just as he did in his day that he was here. As AI continues to advance, some have even speculated that the Antichrist may even be an AI-enhanced human or even fully AI-powered entity housing the spirit of Nimrod. This could go several different ways. Think about the development, these AGI systems, these sentient AI systems with a digital consciousness and a human-machine integration that could create the perfect vessel for a resurrected Nimrod, allowing him to function as a godlike ruler with supernatural intelligence and power and global influence. If Nimrod is truly that figure that once was, now is not, and yet will come, then his return may be closer than we think. Whether through genetic cloning, AI, occult summoning, or even all of the above, it seems like the world is being prepared for a leader who will demand worship and enforce a new world order. At least an attempt to complete what he started in Babel. Just look at the global elites and their secret societies and all their secret black site scientific institutions working hand in hand, opening demonic realms, literally paving the way for the spirit of the Antichrist. And we can see signs that their agenda is rapidly accelerating. Just look at what we talked about earlier today on the topic of 2012. But just as God stopped Nimrod at Babel, he will ultimately defeat him once again. Revelations 19:20 tells us, but the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed the signs on its behalf. With these signs he had deluded those who had received the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The two of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. That same spirit of rebellion that fueled Nimrod will meet again in the final end times and will meet Christ when he returns. No matter what schemes the enemies has devised, Jesus Christ, he's the King of Kings. There is no greater authority. His reign will never end.